Alright, hello guys, Salt here. Today we are going to be going over Worm Prime. Now this is the first time I'm doing a companion, so the format might be a little bit weird, it might be a little bit rough. So if you have any feedback on it, make sure you let me know. So the thing about companions, especially the Sentinels, is a lot of them can be built very similarly to each other. Like you can build a Worm Prime almost exactly like a Death Cube. But they have, each one has very specific things that they are better at than others or worse at than others. And so I'm going to be trying to build these companions specifically. Hey, Eric. Thanks for watching. How are you doing this morning? I'm going to be trying to build these companions specifically for what I believe that they are good at. So let's get into Worm. Okay. So Worm Prime, he's like a little worm guy. I have a skin for him that makes him look adorable here. It's actually not a worm skin. That's a just a sentinel skin in general. It just works for worm because worm actually does look like a worm, and the skin kind of looks like a worm as well. Okay. So worm, I believe, is a steel path viable sentinel to bring with you, but I believe that he is one of like the weaker options. He's not a bad option. There are sentinels that you just would straight up never bring because they don't really provide anything at all. Worm does provide things, and I think he is top tier for very specific warframes. But I think on most warframes they wouldn't bring Worm. So, all right, let's get into the setup here. So as you see, I have two mod slots that are empty, and that's because those are the ones that have options. So first, we're going to be going for Enhanced Vitality for health and Calculated Redirection for shield. Now, there's another option here. You can put the Metal Fiber one. It's right here, Metal Fiber. Now, here's the thing. Let me take off Enhanced Vitality and Calculated Redirection. So when you put mods on, that give you a percentage, you get more out of it if you have a higher base value. So if you look at health, the base value is 450. If you look at shield, the base value is 600. But if you look at armor, the base value is 150. So it's very, very small. So putting Metal Fiber only increases that one to 525. Whereas putting the other ones on, so again, shields were at 600. Now it's at 2,100. And then the Vitality one here, Vitality was at, where is it? Health 450, and now it's going to be at 1575. So you get more out of the Vitality and Redirection than you do Metal Fiber. Now, Metal Fiber still is an option, though. I have kind of a little list of options that you can put in these slots. So Metal Fiber is still an option because even at 500 armor, it still provides something like 50, 60, I believe it is, percent damage reduction to health. It's important to know that armor does not affect damage reduction to shields, only to health. And so that's another kind of blow to Metal Fiber, is that we have this big old 2,100 shields here. Well, Metal Fiber doesn't do anything to that. Metal Fiber only affects the health. Yeah, it's 60% damage reduction, which is nice, but it's 60% damage reduction to only this 1,500, not to this 2,100. So Metal Fiber is not mandatory; it's an option. So I'm going to take it off for now. Now in the next slot here, this is a very powerful utility mod. It's going to change how you set up your Sentinel, though. So Tenacious Bond, what it does is if the companion's weapon is able to achieve over a 50% critical chance, your Warframe weapon gets a 1.2 times critical damage multiplier. That's gigantic. That is a huge damage buff. So now the Sentinel weapon doesn't have to be good, and you'll see that in a bit because I use a not good Sentinel weapon to achieve the over 50% critical chance. So the Sentinel weapon doesn't have to be good. It doesn't have to get kills. You don't even have to have assault mode on. He doesn't even have to shoot with it. As long as he has a weapon that can achieve over a 50% critical chance, your Warframe and his weapons get a 1.2 times critical damage multiplier. So that is gigantic. You also have this little effect here where when you get headshot kills, you reduce your companion recovery timer by 3 seconds. That's nice. Hey, that's cool. So now, I put Tenacious Bond as one of like the staple mods on this build, but technically, if you were using a weapon on your Warframe that was status based, that like had no crit chance, you might not want to use Tenacious Bond, because this is going to add a large crit damage multiplier, and so you are going to have to be getting crits with your main weapon. So that's the only reason you would take Tenacious Bond off, is if you're using a 100% status weapon, basically. Okay, now the next ones here, actually I'm going to go over all 3 of these. All 3 of these mods should be on every single one of your Sentinels all the time. These are mandatory. So that's going to be Primed Animal Instincts, or Animal Instincts if you don't have the primed version. It's going to give you Loot Radar, and it's going to give you Enemy Radar. Vacuum, it's going to pick up stuff for you. And Prime Regen, it's going to, or just regular regen if you don't have the Prime version. It's going to decrease the dead time of your Sentinel, because Sentinels do die quite often in Steel Path. So this is going to reduce your dead time by quite a bit. And then paired up with like Tenacious Bond, they're not going to be dead for very long. So those 3 mods are mandatory for Sentinels. There are some very weird niche builds that may not even run any of these. But those are like, maybe you're making some kind of content where you don't care that you pick up loot, and so you take Vacuum off. But that's like extremely niche stuff. For regular people, you will always run these 3 mods. Okay, now we get into the next one here, Guardian. Guardian is one of the most powerful mods you could have on your Sentinel. What it's going to do is when your Warframe gets his shields depleted, it's going to restore your shields by 100%. So if you're playing, like Necros, who has like regular shields at like 500 or 600, when he gets his shields depleted, it's going to restore him, 500-600 shields. Or if you're playing Hildren with 10,000 shields, it's going to restore 10,000 shields to Hildren when hers gets depleted. So Guardian is extremely powerful. Now, obviously, I'm playing Inaro, so Guardian's not going to do anything. So that's another thing. So just like Tenacious Bond, if you're playing a 100% status weapon, you wouldn't use Tenacious Bond. Well, if you're playing Inaros or you're playing Nidus, who don't have shields, you wouldn't use Guardian. But any other Warframe, Guardian is like a top-tier Sentinel mod. Okay. And now we're going to get into a Wyrm Prime specific mod, and that's going to be Negate. So what he does is about like every 5 seconds, he will prevent a status effect from applying to you. Now that could be something like a fire proc, it could be something like a toxin proc, but he actually will negate stagger as well. So he'll negate, or knockdown rather. He'll negate like you getting knocked down, you getting pulled by like those little dudes that pull you. Things like that. Very, very useful mod. And this right here, Negate, is the specific reason why Wyrm Prime is a viable companion to very specific Warframes. If Wyrm Prime did not have Negate, he wouldn't be a viable companion. There would be companions that are just 100 times better. But because of Negate, there are certain very specific Warframes that Wyrm Prime is like a top tier pick. And that would be things like Loki, like Avara. And it's because those Warframes are invisible. And a lot of times there's no way to actually make your companion shoot or do anything while they're invisible. All they could do is do their buff or I don't think they even would do their debuff. Some of them will, and some of them won't. Their buff or debuff abilities. They don't shoot. They don't do any kind of like aggressive things while you're anything that would alert an enemy basically while you're invisible. And so, having a companion that has a lot that might be really good on other Warframes. That does like a lot of maybe they have a lot of their own specific mods that do like really aggressive things. It's not going to work on Loki or Avara. You need more of just like a something that's just going to help you here and there, like not get hit by a fire proc, not get hit by a toxic proc, things like that. So that's where Wyrm Prime becomes valid. And that's it for what I have on him here. There is one other Wyrm Prime specific mod, and that's called Crowd Dispersion. So he's going to release a radial knockdown, and he's going to like throw enemies around. It's not very strong. It gets a little bit stronger if you're using Gloom, because it's kind of like the Arcane Eruption. Arcane Eruption is not super good, but if you mix it with Gloom, it's actually pretty damn good. So Crowd Dispersion's similar, where it's like throwing an enemy around, he just is going to get right back up in like half a second, not really that big of a deal. But when you mix it with a slowing effect, all of a sudden throwing an enemy and his animation of getting thrown and getting back up is all of a sudden now like 10 seconds long. And so it acts like a 10-second CC or whatever, however strong you have your Gloom or your slow effect at. So things that have slow effects actually get more from things like Crowd Dispersion or even the Arcane, like Arcane Eruption. The other niche thing you could do, although I don't really think it's a viable tactic on Wyrm, but it is possible. You could do this. Is you can mix Crowd Dispersion with a bond mod called, where is it? I think it's Manifold. Yep. So you would mix it with Manifold Bond, and it would make Crowd Dispersion have a less of a cooldown. So instead of it being like, I think it's like once every 10-ish seconds he casts this. So like instead of like once every 10-ish seconds, it could be instant if you can get enough kills on enemies that have 3 or more unique status effects. So like using Manifold Bond with Crowd Dispersion is going to require a very specific Warframe setup. So I also don't think it's like the best use of Manifold Bond. I think there are other companions out there that benefit way more from Manifold Bond, like Dirija. I don't have a Dirija build yet, I do have a Dirija build, but I haven't made a video of Dirija yet, but I will. So like Manifold Bond works amazing on Dirija, but on Wyrm, all you're really going to be doing is like having this little like machine gun knockdown effect, which is it's kind of more novel than it is useful, because the knockdown effect of Wyrm is actually quite aggressive. It's not a light effect. It flings enemies, and so it actually becomes kind of hard to shoot at them then, because they're getting like ragdolled all over the place. So I'm going to take those 2 off. Okay, so let me give you some options for these 2 slots here. So our first option is going to be Sacrifice. Now, what Sacrifice does is when you die, your Sentinel is going to revive you. So it takes 4 seconds for him to revive you, but he will revive you. So that is a super nice option. It's more of like a utility pick, Sacrifice. The other option is going to be Meta Ray, where the Sentinel will occasionally heal you for 12% of your health over 4 seconds. Of course, so I use this on my Inaros. So the more health you have, the more that 12% is. And so a lot of people are like, why is your Inaros, why does he never die and stuff like that? It's because of things like Meta Ray. Any kind of percent health over seconds is going to be a gigantic amount of health on Warframes that have a lot of health. So like Nidus, Inaros, of course. But this helps any Warframe, really. So Meta Ray is a good pick. Next one, we're going to have, and we kind of went over this, we're going to have Metal Fiber And then that is an option just to add a little bit more survivability. Just remember that metal fiber is only going to affect damage reduction on your health and not your shields. Now, if you want to pair metal fiber with synth fiber. So synth fiber, when you pick up an health orb, your companions get another 100% armor for 12 seconds. So I don't think it's going to fit there. But you wouldn't, if you wanted to use synth fiber, you should probably also be using metal fiber. Because metal fiber is just going to be straight up better than synth fiber. The only reason you would use synth fiber is if you want to stack it with metal fiber. So that would be the only reason you would use synth fiber, is if you're also using metal fiber. Okay, so we'll get those two out. Those are the two armor ones. Next one is going to be assault mode, of course. Get your little guy shooting. If you don't have assault mode on, your dude won't shoot. Now, as I explained before, Wyrm is kind of a weaker pick, and the only time I actually find Wyrm useful is on Warframes that use invisibility as their survivability tactic, and are maybe vulnerable to like a stray, not Blitz Eximus, because it wouldn't affect it there, but like are vulnerable to a stray fire Eximus or some kind of status effect coming at them. And because of that, like when you're invisible, even if you have assault mode on, he's not going to shoot. So there are ways with some invisible Warframes, like Ash, you can get your guy to shoot while you're invisible, but you have to use specific bond mods for that. So for this specific Warframe, because of the Warframes I choose to pair with him, I think assault mode's kind of a bad pick. You actually usually don't want this guy to shoot, because most of the time he's not going to be shooting, because you're going to be pairing him with invisible Warframes. And then the last option, and the one I actually like to use, is going to be accelerated deflection. What this is going to do is it's just going to, when his shields go down, so he has 2,100 shields, when his shields go down, it's going to allow him to get his shields back a little bit quicker. That's pretty much it. So I actually prefer accelerated deflection over metal fiber. And that's just because, you know, of course, your shields are your first line of defense. That's what's going to get hit first. And, you know, they just come back quicker. That's simple as that. So my normal setup on how I run this is accelerated deflection and meta ray. So again, though, these might change depending on what you're playing. So, of course, I'm going to be doing this on Naros, so I wouldn't technically need Guardian. I'm going to leave it on, but I wouldn't technically need Guardian there. Okay, so that's Wyrm. Now we're going to go over weapons to pair with him. And I'm going to go over the weapon that I believe is the best to pair with him. And that is going to be the Volklock. Very weird weapon, very bad weapon, but there is a specific reason why you use the Volklock. So there are only 2 weapons that, without Rivens, can achieve over a 50% critical chance. And again, going back to the Wyrm Prime's tenacious bond here, we're trying to get that 1.2 times crit damage on our Warframe weapons. Because Warframe weapons are always going to be way better than Sentinel weapons. Sentinel weapons are just kind of an afterthought. So we're more worried about, you know, getting this huge crit damage multiplier on our Warframe. So we don't really care that our Sentinel has a crappy weapon, because we're going to get more out of our own weapon. So we're going to be putting the Volklock on. Now the other one that can achieve a 50% critical chance rating is the Volcax. Now, you can use either. If you don't have the Volklock, you can use the Volcax. But if you have a choice of one over the other, I would choose the Volklock, because the Volcax has a 6-second reload. So if for some reason, if you were going to put assault mode on it and you did want it to shoot, the Volcax is almost a useless weapon. It has such a ridiculous reload. It's horrible. Absolutely horrible. I mean, the Volklock's not good either, but it doesn't have a 6-second reload. So that's the reason I would choose the Volklock over the Volcax. But most of my time playing Wyrm, I don't run with assault mode, so it literally does not matter, like, most of the time. So either of these two, the important thing is that you achieve over a 50% critical chance. And so let's go into the Volklock here. I'm going to go to upgrade. Now, it honestly, if you're not going to run assault mode, it doesn't even matter what you put on here. The only thing that matters is you put a single crit chance mod on to get your crit chance over that 50%. So without it, it's at 35. The Volcax, I think, starts at 20, but I think it goes up to 60 with that one on. So we're going to put that critical. We're actually not going to be going for critical delay because this already has a horrible fire rate, so we don't want any more reduction on it. So we're just going to go point strike. So it's going to go from that 35. So right now we can't benefit from that bond mod. And then boom, now we can benefit. Now all of a sudden our Warframe has 1.2 times crit damage, which is gigantic. Okay, now the actual build on the Volklock, if you're not using assault mode, literally doesn't matter except for this one specific mod. But if for some strange reason you want your Volklock to be blasting, I'm going to show you the weird way to build it. So the problem with the Volklock, so the other one has a horrible reload. This one has a horrible fire rate. So even, as you see here, we have 4 fire rate mods. Even with 4 fire rate mods, this is still only going to shoot once every 2 seconds. So it's still very poor as far as the fire rate goes. Now, what do you do with a weapon that doesn't do a lot of damage and only shoots once every 2 seconds? Well, we're going to try to get the most out of it, right? If it only shoots once every 2 seconds, we want it to be doing something useful. And so we're going to have it put radiation on things, so that way, things start shooting at each other. So there's a nice new mod that came out called Radiated Reload, which will just simply give you radiation and reload speed, which helps. That's nice too. And we're also going to boost up the status chance of this weapon. So we're going to give it the 90% status chance mod, just to make it a little bit higher of a chance that it actually produces that radiation effect. And we're going to put split chamber for multi-shot, again, just so that there's more bullets, so there's more chance that we get that radiation effect. That is how we're going to build the Volklock. It is a utility build. This is actually not going to do good damage. What it's going to do is every 2 seconds is it's going to basically put a radiation proc on an enemy. And enemies are going to start shooting at that enemy. He's going to start shooting at other enemies. It's going to cause a little bit of chaos. So that's how you build a bad weapon, is you try to get it like a utility effect. So, but again, the most important thing, point strike. Okay, and then the other viable option for Wyrm, and this is if you want, for some reason, if you do want him to shoot, it's going to be Vergless. Vergless is a very powerful steel path damaging weapon for Sentinels. And so for the Vergless, you are going to be building it for damage. Now, the thing about the Vergless is that it cannot, without a Riven, I think even with a Riven though, I think it has a really, really poor crit chance. 8%, yeah. Even with a Riven, it would not achieve over 50% critical chance. So if you choose to use Vergless, you likely will not be using Tenacious Bond because you will not be achieving over 50% crit chance. So that's unfortunate. So that's why I think Vergless, even though it is a powerful Sentinel weapon, is a worse choice for Wyrm. Just because you're not going to be achieving that. But for Vergless, you're going to be building this out for damage. So you're going to be using Split Chamber for multi-shot, Prime Shred for fire rate, Serration for flat damage, Heavy Caliber for flat damage, Rhyme Rounds and Malignant Force to create viral, and then 2 heat mods to make heat and have a little bit of a higher weighting. Viral's still going to outweight it, but it's okay. So, but we'll go back to that Volklock here. I kind of just want to go into, I'm not going to do what I normally do, and I do like the Steel Path runs. I'm just going to quickly go into a Steel Path and kind of show how the Volklock works and kind of show how the Vergless works. And then I also just want to showcase how the other Wyrm, even though I don't think this is good, I want to show how it works. So I'm going to put crowd dispersion on, and you can kind of see enemies getting thrown around and see how it works. Maybe you would want to use it. You know, maybe when you do your own testing or do your own builds, you'd be like, hey, you know what? That was kind of cool. Maybe I do want to use crowd dispersion. So I'm going to put crowd dispersion on just so I can show it off. I want to show the Volklock off too, so I am going to have to put assault mode on. Otherwise, he will not shoot. So I'm going to take Guardian off for now, just because I'm just showing assault mode. And technically Guardian doesn't do anything for Inaros, but that would be there on your normal build for a non-Inaros or Nidus build. Okay, so let's go in here. We're going to quickly show off the Volklock, and then I'm going to quickly show off the Verglis. I'm not going to do a full 5 minutes. I'm just going to kind of do maybe 2 minutes, show it shooting a bit, and then go from there. But again, Wyrm usually pairs best with Warframes, where even if they had assault mode, they couldn't shoot because they're invisible. So keep that in mind, that normally with Wyrm, with the Warframes that you pair it with, you would not be using assault mode. So he's just gonna shoot. He's gonna be applying these little radiation procs to enemies. See how they're all beating each other. So even on a weapon that does really poor damage itself, like this does absolutely piss poor damage. Even on a weapon that does piss poor damage, if you can build it for some kind of utility purpose, you can actually get something out of it. So for this weapon, we're getting I don't know why I have weird audio right now. I don't know if you guys are hearing that too. There we go. Well, it's kind of back. Maybe it's standing up here. Yeah, maybe it's a location that causes weird audio issues. You can still maximize a weapon that does poor DPS. This does almost 0 DPS, and I'm still killing enemies here because they're all beating each other. So, but it's only going to shoot, even though this little dragon's kind of moving his little hands, and he looks adorable. He's moving them pretty quickly. He's still only shooting once every 2 seconds. You'll actually only see that little bullet come out once every 2 seconds. So it's not really the... I think the animation of him moving his little legs is just always there. It doesn't actually the fire rate is not tied to it. So yeah, very slow firing. Once every 2 seconds, you're going to get a bullet out. Okay, and then also let's pay attention to that Wyrm ability. So let's see if enemies go flying. Eventually they should. Let me see here. Let me get in this group of enemies. Come on, Wyrm, you can do it. You can do it. Maybe. I swear I put it on. Are you going to throw him? We have to hit something. He should be using his crowd dispersion, which is going to throw enemies around. I just have not seen it go off. Right, we'll try to get it to go off a little bit here, and then we'll look at the Verglis real quick. Maybe I forgot to put it on for some reason. When I was doing testing yesterday, it was going off like clockwork. I could have timed it. It was easy. Right now, though, it's not going off at all. Okay. So I'm going to abort here. We're going to bring up the Verglis. We're going to show that one real quick. Now, the Verglis, unlike the Volklock, is an actually good steel path killer. So we're going to go here. We're going to put, instead of the Volklock, we're going to put our Verglis on. And I'm just going to double check that I have crowd dispersion on. I'm pretty sure I do. Crowd dispersion, yeah. Unleashes when multiple enemies are nearby. Yes, I don't know why it was not triggering. A little bit weird there. Okay, let's show the Verglis off. Now, if you do want a damaging Sentinel weapon, this is the choice for you. There are other good Sentinel weapons. Prime Burst Laser is good for applying statuses because it has full IPS stats along with, I think, Electric. And Hellstrom is really good for assists for like Death Cube. But for damage, it is 100% going to be the Vergless. So let us, where is it? Where are you, Kuva Fortress? There it is.
Scans show Grenier are harvesting Kuva nearby.
All right, so we're going to show off the Vergless, but we're also going to try to show off that Wyrm ability, Crowd Dispersion. Again, I don't think Crowd Dispersion is super useful, but, you know, it has its uses, I guess. So let me go, like, in between a group of enemies, and hopefully it triggers. You're going to see him, like, kind of go flying, or you should. So look at how quickly this thing is killing enemies here. It will melt Steel Path enemies quicker than actually some Warframe weapons, which is pretty cool. And you can get ribbons for the Vergless too. So I have a ribbon on my Vergless, but I'm not showing it with a ribbon. This is ribbonless, is how it's being shown. So if you have a ribbon, it would even be stronger. So I do have punch through on my Vergless, and if you can see when it targets an enemy, it actually will go through him. So I think it is kind of worth putting punch through on it because it can, if they're close, it can hit multiple targets at once. I'm still not having Crowd Dispersion trigger, though, for some reason. Like I said, yesterday it was triggering like clockwork. Now it's not triggering at all. The only difference I had yesterday was I had a primary weapon on. Maybe it's because I have no primary weapon on. So the Vergless is a very good Steel Path killer. I mean, it's not amazing, right? It's not going to be like, you know, the Torrid Warframe weapon. But for a Sentinel weapon, like, this is pretty much the best you're going to get as far as killing. And these are Steel Path enemies, and there's no form of armor strip on them other than, you know, some fire procs, which doesn't fully strip them. So... all right, that was showing off the Vergless. I, for some reason, cannot get crowd control to trigger, even though I was able to do it yesterday. I'm going to attempt one more time to get crowd control to trigger. I'm going to try to put a primary weapon on, like I had yesterday. I'm also going to put it in the very first precept slot. So for anyone that doesn't know, kind of like Elements, but there's a little bit of a weird thing about it. The game does read precept mods from left to right. So whatever you want your Sentinel to do more of, or to like have priority in doing, like if it's able to do two things, you want it to do this one specific thing. You want it to be like at the very left or at the top, on the top row. Now, sometimes that's not true. Like sometimes the preset mods actually don't matter. Like Prime Regen, you can put it in the very front, and that's because the only time it's going to trigger is when you're dead. So it doesn't matter if it's at the front or the back. So it's kind of weird. Same thing with like Assault mode. It's always going to attack, so it doesn't really matter where it is on it. So, okay, we have Crowd Dispersion on. I'm going to try to throw one primary weapon on. I don't care, just whatever I have here, Amprex. And see if we can get Crowd Dispersion to trigger. If it can't, then just know that it just flings enemies around. It violently flings them, though. That's kind of a negative because it's hard to target them when they're violently being flung around.
Scans show Grenier are harvesting Kuva nearby. Set off the alarms to draw them out.
There might be something like stupid that I'm missing for crowd control to trigger, and people in the comments might yell at me. So, all right, I should be able to kind of stand right in the middle, and it should fling enemies. There we go. You see how violently it flung those enemies there. It's pretty funny. I mean, it won't trigger very often. We'll wait for it to trigger again here, and it's going to violently fling these enemies away. There we go. So that's how it should work. Like I think it's like every 10-ish seconds. You know, if you kind of timed it there, it should be like every 10-ish seconds that it's going to violently fling enemies away. You don't really get to choose when it happens, so sometimes it's going to do it like at weird times. Like there, it only flung like 3 enemies, where maybe I would have wanted it to do it like right here. But now the thing about ragdolling enemies is it's okay, right? It flings enemies, they get up. They only take about like half a second to get back up. There we go. Flings enemies. But it gets better if you put slow. So let me put my glue on. And now we're going to wait for for it to ragdoll an enemy. And you're going to see how long it takes for an enemy to get up off the floor. So, you know, normally it would take like half a second or so. So now this guy... Oh, he's dead now. Okay. But if you have a slow on... I actually just ran out of energy. Give myself an energy pad. If you have a slow on, that ragdoll effect is actually... You're going to get more out of it. Because enemies are now going to like be slowly getting up off the floor. So where it used to be like maybe a half second, 1 second CC, now it's like a 4, 5, 6 second CC because they have to slowly get up off the floor, slowly pick their weapon back up, kind of a thing. So I don't think crowd dispersion's super worth it putting it on Wyrm. Hey Camilato, how are you doing? Thanks for following. I'm doing a weird video today. It's my first companion video I've done, so it's kind of a little bit of a weird one. Hopefully it's useful for people. So, but yeah, I don't think crowd dispersion's like super useful on Wyrm, just because I think there's better things you could be using those slots for. Oh, another thing to note, another thing I wanted to kind of show viewers is that there's a lot of like information going around. Let me hit a few exports. That way I can kind of explain this a little bit before I... That's like, if you use assault mode, your sentinel is going to die. You shouldn't use assault mode. It's horrible, yada, yada, yada. And the thing is, like, if your sentinel dies, it's usually dying because of AoE damage. And whether you have assault mode on or not, the AoE damage is still going to... Oh, thanks, Camilla. Whether you have assault mode on or not, like that AoE damage is still going to hurt your pet and kill him. So like as you see right now, my pet is not, like if you look at his health in the top right, he's not really even getting shot at. The things that are hitting him are kind of like by accident. You know, maybe if I put myself at a weird angle, right? Like I kind of crouch here. Yeah, there we go. Now he can get shot up because I'm in a weird angle. And so enemies that are trying to shoot at me are like hitting him instead. But if they have a choice to shoot at him and me, even though he's the one blasting, I haven't really even fired a single shot, they're hitting me. They're not hitting him. So don't be afraid to have assault mode on. I don't think assault mode is the best for this specific pet, though. And that's, again, because you're pairing it with Warframes that are usually invisible. And he's not going to shoot anyway, even if he has assault mode on. So let me go back out, and we'll go over the build just one more time. Okay, so I don't use the Verglis myself. I use the Volklock because I want to get that 1.2 times. I play other games too. I love co-op games. I'm a huge fan of co-op games. Deep Rock Galactic. I'm all up in that new Helldivers 2, Darktide. I love co-op games. Okay, so we got the Wyrm here. I'm gonna kind of like redo the mods that I messed around with here. So we don't use those. We use, God, what did I have there before? Meta-ray and Negate. Oh, I have Negate, Meta-ray, okay. Guardian. Sacrifice. I don't believe I had Sacrifice there. I had Meta-ray. Okay. So for the build here, we're going to be using Enhanced Vitality and Calculated Redirection. And that's because this companion, and actually most companions, it's not really just this one. Most companions have very high health, very high shields, and very poor armor. So you get more out of the enhanced vitality and the calculated redirection than you do the enhanced fiber or steel fiber, whatever it's called, metal fiber. There we go. I myself am going to be using accelerated deflection because if you noticed, if you were like watching my companion's health during that run through, his actual health wasn't being hit most of the time. It was his shields. And so accelerated deflection is just going to let his shields go back a little bit quicker. Tenacious Bond is probably one of the strongest mods in the game. So this is going to give you a 1.2 times critical damage multiplier as long as your companion can achieve over a 50% critical chance on his weapon. And there are very specific weapons, there's only 2 of them, that can achieve over a 50% critical chance without rivens. So if you have rivens, there are better weapons that you can use instead of the Volklock. But if you don't have a riven, the Volklock's the way to go. Primed, so these 3 right here, primed regen, vacuum, and primed animal instinct, every single pet. Every single pet in the game. The regular pets, instead of vacuum, you'll have fetch, so you'll put fetch here instead of vacuum. But every single companion and sentinel in the game should be having primed animal instinct for loot radar and enemy radar, vacuum or fetch to collect loot, and primed regen, although, you know, companions can't have prime regen. But sentinels can have prime regen to make them come back to life a little bit quicker. Guardian is, again, one of the strongest sentinel mods in the game. It's going to boost your shields by 100% when your shields fully break. Now, if you're playing a regular Warframe that maybe only has 500 shields, that's great. You get 500 shields back when it breaks. If you're playing a Hildren that has 10,000 shields, you get 10,000 shields when they break. So Guardian is extremely powerful. Obviously, if you're playing a Naros or Nidus, you don't need Guardian because they don't have shields. So in those situations, you don't need Guardian. But in every other situation, Guardian is the way to go. I'm personally going to be using Mediray here, just for a little bit extra health. You know, if there is a situation where you're taking some good damage, your pet's going to help heal you up. And then Negate. Negate is pretty much the reason Wyrm is like a valid companion. If it wasn't for Negate, you could get Tenacious Bond on any other pet. You know, so the only reason Wyrm is a valid companion for like Steel Path Endurance is because of this mod. So it's going to prevent a status from flying to you every 5 seconds. Now that could be a regular status like fire, toxin, electric, or it could be weird stuff like knockdown. It'll stop you from getting knocked down. It'll stop you from getting like pulled and dragged by those like things that pull you. So it's not the strongest effect, but there are specific Warframes, and I'm mostly talking about the invisible ones. Most of the invisible Warframes, your pet will not do anything. It won't attack, it won't shoot, it won't do its aggressive precepts. The only thing it'll do is its defensive like buffs. And because of that, for those specific Warframes, like Loki for instance, I use Wyrm Prime. So if it wasn't for that, Wyrm Prime is one of the weaker companions, but it's valid because of that reason. Okay, I think that's pretty much it. That is the build for Wyrm Prime. He's kind of like a little niche guy, but if you like invisible Warframes, he is super useful. Oh, and again, the Volklock. Go over the Volklock one more time. So the Volklock, the important thing about it is that, again, going back to the Wyrm Prime here, we're trying to get that. We need a companion critical chance over 50%. So to achieve that, the Volklock and the Volcax are the only 2 Sentinel weapons that can achieve over a 50% critical chance without rivens. Do I have any stuff on my Twitch channel? Yeah, I have some. I think Twitch, like they store videos for like 2-ish weeks, but I think most of my stuff right now is Warframe. I think I had Dark Tide stuff on it, but again, Twitch only stores it for like 2 weeks, and I don't think I've done a Dark Tide stream in like 3-ish weeks. So it might be all Warframe right now. So the Volt Clock, the most important thing is to achieve that over 50% critical chance. And so the most important mod to put on this weapon is Point Strike. Honestly, if you don't even plan to use, oh yeah, the mascot logo overlay banner, things like that. Yeah, I I'm not very tech savvy, so I have to kind of like slowly learn how to do a lot of those things. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna eventually try to do. I'm not super tech savvy, so it takes me a little bit to learn these things. Like, I mean, honestly, it took me a really long time to learn how to put a image into like PNG from from something else. You know, people that probably knew how to do that like super quickly. It took me like a full day to figure that out. So it'll come eventually, but it's gonna take me a bit. Yeah, it might be cool. All right, so the Volklock, gonna put Point Strike on, and then that's really it. That's all you really need is Point Strike. If you for some reason want it to shoot, if you want to use assault mode on this, Volklock is a bad weapon. So the only way we're going to make this useful is to give some kind of a utility effect out of it, and that's by having it start making enemies fight each other through radiation. Now the Volklock has a horrible, horrible, horrible fire rate. Even with all 4 fire rate mods on, it's still only going to shoot it once every 2 seconds. So we're going to use all 4 fire rate mods. We're going to put radiated reload on, which is going to produce radiation. We're going to put rifle aptitude on, which is going to give us more chance to get that radiation proc. And we're going to put split chamber, which is going to give us more bullets, which is going to give us more chance to produce that radiation proc. So these 7 mods here are only really if you're going to use assault mode. If you're not using assault mode, you don't really even need these. You only need Point Strike to achieve over that 50% critical chance. But if you wanted to shoot, hey, you get a little bit of effect here with radiated reload. That's pretty much it for the Wyrm Prime build. I hope you guys liked it. If you liked it, give it a like. And I appreciate it. This is the first time doing the companion format. So if you guys have any insight on maybe like what I could do in the future for it or whatnot, make sure you let me know. All right. Thank you so much. Bye.